They said Jonah was too young for the wedding. That was it. No explanation beyond a line on fancy cardstock, tucked into a gold-trimmed envelope. Adults only. 18 and up. Strictly enforced. Like we were trying to sneak in a toddler with cake on his face, not a 17-year-old who already had one foot out the door into college. When I opened that envelope at our kitchen table, the light outside had already gone soft, filtered through the Douglas firs that hemmed our yard. Jonah was hunched over his sketch pad, earbuds in, tapping a pencil against his chin. I read the words again, hoping they'd rearrange themselves. They didn't. "Hey," Jonah said, not looking up. "Is it from Uncle Brian?" "Yeah," I said. "It's the wedding invite." He pulled his earbuds out. "Am I going?" I hesitated, then showed him the line. His eyes scanned it once, and he nodded slowly, like it confirmed something he already suspected. "They don't want me there." "No," I started, but the truth clogged in my throat. "It's because I'm adopted, right?" he asked, too calmly. I wanted to say 100 things about logistics, consistency, fairness, but none of it mattered. None of it held up against the quiet way he asked that question, like he'd practiced it before. I told him, "It's not you, it's them." He just nodded again, set the envelope down beside his sketch pad, and went back to shading in the wings of some mythological creature he was working on. I canceled our RSVP that night. Just a simple not attending. No explanation. No scene. Just no. The next day, the text started. Brian wrote, "Hey, saw your RSVP. Everything cool." A few hours later, "If this is about the age limit, we're being super consistent. Nothing personal, not personal, except it was my son, his nephew, and the only one who got excluded." I didn't answer. Rachel chimed in. "Wait, you're not coming. What's going on?" Then my dad William called. That was rare. He's the type who only calls when something's broken or someone's dying. He opened with, "Done. This can't really be about the invite, right? Jonah's almost 18. He's family." I said. He sighed. "It's one night. Don't punish your brother over this." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "We're not going," and hung up. I thought that'd be the end of it. I hoped maybe they'd let it go. But people like them don't let silence go unpunished. Not when they've spent years believing they're the center of every story. December came like it always did in our part of Washington gray skies, wet pavement, and a quiet that settles deep in the trees. Jonah didn't bring up the wedding again. He'd stopped talking about it after deleting the screenshots of suits he was considering. No tantrums, no visible hurt, just a silence that spoke too loudly. I tried not to check the family group chat, but I did. I watched the messages pile up. "Who's bringing dessert to Daniel's this year? Can we come the night before again? Jonah's still into peppermint bark." That one was from Brian. "If he's even going to be there this time," he added in the next message. Like Jonah was the problem, not the fact that they'd locked him out and handed me the key, expecting I'd still show up. I didn't reply. For the first time in years, I didn't clean the guest bathroom. I didn't pull out the folding chairs from the garage. I didn't stock the fridge with extra cider or plan seating arrangements to keep awkward silences from turning into landmines. We just didn't host Christmas. No dramatic declarations, no warnings, just nothing. I think that's what hit them hardest. My sister Rachel texted, "Can you at least tell us what's going on?" My mother left a voicemail. "Your father and I are worried. It's not too late to make things right." But they never said what needed making right. On Christmas Eve, I made lasagna from scratch. Jonah iced snowflake-shaped sugar cookies while wearing my old college hoodie. Ethan played a jazz playlist through the speakers and lit a fire in the living room. No one knocked on the door. No one called after 6 p.m. And for once, the house didn't feel full of tension pretending to be family. We didn't say much during dinner. Jonah ate 3 helpings and asked Ethan if we could try a new kind of paint for his next project. When we opened our gifts, he smiled like he used to when he was little, wide and unguarded. He gave me a charcoal sketch of a mountain fox under northern lights. He titled it Home. That night, when I tucked it into a frame, I realized something. They hadn't rejected Jonah. They just revealed what they always were. And we'd finally stopped apologizing for noticing. New Year's slid in quietly, like mist under the door. Jonah fell asleep on the couch with a sketch pad resting on his chest, still open to a half-finished drawing of a crow perched on a broken fence. I didn't wake him. Ethan and I toasted with mugs of peppermint tea while the fireworks flared somewhere over the next hill, muted by the cold window pane. "You miss them," Ethan asked, not looking at me, just tracing his finger around the rim of his cup. I miss the version of them I pretended was real, I said, but not who they turned out to be. We didn't talk after that. We didn't need to. But of course, they didn't stay silent. Rachel sent a voice message the next day. You could hear it in her tone, trying to sound calm, but every sentence held a blade behind its back. Leo, you've really let this spiral. It's like every time someone doesn't treat Jonah like royalty, you act like it's a war crime. Families have rough spots. That doesn't mean you get to exile everyone. It's like you're using him as a shield now. It's not healthy. That's not love, it's obsession. I deleted the message before it finished, blocked her number. I didn't need her approval. I needed to keep the promise I made to Jonah when I adopted him at 3 years old, that he would never again be treated like an afterthought. And if that made me an obsessed parent, so be it. Weeks passed. Then came the knock. It was a Thursday afternoon, gray as usual. I'd just walked through the door from the school where I worked as an art therapist when I heard the chime. I wasn't expecting anyone. Jonah was upstairs editing a submission for a scholarship contest. Ethan was still at the clinic. I opened the door. There they were, my parents. My mother held a glass Tupperware dish like it was a magic token, probably her snickerdoodles. The kind she used to send in care packages back when I was in college. The kind that were soft in the middle, but always just a little burnt around the edges. Leo, she said, offering a small, hopeful smile, like we were characters in a sitcom reunion. I didn't say anything, just stared at the container in her hands, like it might explode. My dad took a step forward. Can we come in, just for a minute? No, I said, firmly, not today. They looked surprised, not shocked, more like disappointed that I hadn't stuck to the script, that I wasn't playing the role of the dutiful eldest anymore. My mom's smile began to falter. We just wanted to talk. I know it's been hard raising a teenager and pushing everyone else away. We gave you time, my dad added, like they were being generous. But this, you're going to lose your real family over a kid who's going to leave in a few months. My stomach flipped. Real family. He's 17, my mom said, her voice dropping low, soft like pity. Soon he'll be off to college. And then what? You'll be alone. You'll regret this. Then she said it, the thing I think she'd believed all along, but finally decided to say out loud. He's not blood. Leo, he's not really one of us. She said it so gently, as if doing me a kindness, like I should nod and thank her for reminding me. I didn't nod. I stepped back and said, you need to leave. Right now. My dad's mouth opened in protest, but I didn't let him speak. You don't get to show up with cookies and call it kindness. You don't get to say that to my face and still think you'll be welcome here. You're going to regret this, my mom warned again, voice trembling now. When he leaves, when he forgets you, you'll see. We'll still be here. You'll come back. I closed the door without another word, locked it, pressed my back against it until I couldn't hear their footsteps anymore. The next day, I told Jonah I didn't want a god. I didn't want him to carry their poison. But I'd never lied to him. Not once. Not about the hard stuff. He sat still on the love seat, legs crossed under him, sketchbook beside his thigh. I told him what they said about blood, about how they thought he'd leave, about how they believed I'd come crawling back. He didn't cry, but I saw his hands curl into fists, saw the way he pressed his lips together like they were holding back all the questions he'd already learned not to ask. Do they really think I'll leave you? He asked after a long pause. No, I said. They hope you will. So I'll need them again. He nodded slowly, jaw tight. They don't get to hope things about me. And that right there was the moment I stopped hoping for any kind of repair. That clarity in his voice, it wasn't bitterness. It was self-respect. And he had earned it. A week later, my cousin James forwarded me an email Rachel had sent out to the extended family. A long, whiny, backhanded smear. She said Jonah had manipulated me, that I was unstable, that he was distant and difficult, and I was obsessed with him, because I needed someone to control. She called my parenting unhealthy, called Jonah ungrateful, and worse. It worked. Suddenly, relatives I hadn't heard from in years started reaching out. Aunt Cheryl sent me a text. Are you okay? Uncle Craig called Ethan. Is Leo having a breakdown? My second cousin Harper commented under one of Jonah's art posts. You're so lucky. Don't forget who gave you a home. Jonah saw it. I watched him see it. That was the final straw. I didn't get angry. I got meticulous. I spent the next 2 nights going through emails, old photos, saved text threads, not to dig up drama, but to write it down. I opened a fresh document and titled it, "For those who want the full story." No bitterness, no pleading, just facts. Screenshots of invitations they never replied to. Photos from birthdays they skipped. Messages where they called Jonah that kid or your son like he was a guest in our lives, not family. I included the RSVP with adults only 18 plus, strictly enforced. I attached a photo of Jonah's glitter-covered wedding card, the one Tessa left to wrinkle under a Starbucks cup. I added no commentary, no labels, no rage, just receipts. Then I wrote a letter, just one, to anyone wondering why our family doesn't gather like we used to. Here's the truth. I don't hate anyone. I'm not trying to punish anyone, but I will not host people who made my son feel invisible. Not again. If you believe I overreacted, that's your right. But I won't shrink myself for comfort anymore. And then I hit send to the extended family. Just once. No follow-up. No group chat argument. Just truth. Quietly delivered. Some replied. Most didn't. A few quietly unfriended Rachel. Some didn't believe a word I said. One even sent a passive-aggressive DM about how misunderstandings happen in every family. I didn't care. I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for Jonah, so he'd never again ask if he imagined it. So he'd never again stare down at a sketch pad and wonder if he should have just been born different to be loved. After that, I blocked anyone who responded with guilt-wrapped gaslighting. Anyone who said, "But maybe if you just," or "You're being too dramatic." Those voices. Gone. I made space in my life, and it felt like finally breathing after years of dust. And then, silence. Not true silence. Of course, I'm sure they still talk. I'm sure I'm still a story told over wine glasses when someone wants to complain about how hard it is to be misunderstood these days. But silence from them directly. No more calls, no more dropped cookies. And in that quiet, something grew. Jonah, 18 now, had started his freshman year at a university art program. His dream. He wasn't the loudest in class, but his professors said he saw things differently, deeper, with patience. He still called every night, not because I made him, but because we wanted to talk. He sent photos of his work-in-progress things I couldn't always understand, but always found beautiful. One day, it was a charcoal portrait of a boy with no face, just a maze in the shape of a skull. Another day, it was a watercolor of a door locked from both sides. He never told me what they meant. I never asked. When I dropped him off at the dorms in the fall, we didn't cry. He hugged me long, though, pressed his forehead to mine like we were sharing something wordless. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. I nodded. I knew. A few weeks later, as I cleaned out a drawer in the hallway cabinet, I found an old Christmas photo, the kind taken on timer mode, slightly crooked, everyone awkwardly posed. Rachel with her arms around her twins, Tessa, sipping wine and pretending not to roll her eyes. My parents at the back, close but somehow distant. And there I was, holding Jonah in my lap. He looked tiny, worn Spider-Man hoodie, no smile. I stared at it a long time, not because I missed those people, but because I remembered how much I used to try. All the ways I tried to squeeze us into their shape. I flipped the photo over, in my handwriting. The year was scribbled. First Christmas with Jonah, 2010. Then, underneath, something else I must have added years later. Family isn't who shows up for the photo. It's who shows up afterward. I tucked the photo back into the drawer, not to forget but to remember how far we'd come. Jonah called that night just to say he'd submitted a new piece to a campus exhibit. "It's about armor," he said. "What kind of armor?" I asked. "Not metal," he replied. "More like what you wear to walk through rooms where people don't see you." And I got it. Completely. I didn't say much. Just told him I was proud of him. Because that armor, he built it himself. And I just made sure no one told him to take it off. It was a Thursday. Cold, gray, and quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like it's waiting for something to break. I had just come home from work, coat still on, keys in hand, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Eli was still at the hospital finishing a long shift. Jonah was upstairs editing photos for a project. I assumed it was a neighbor. Maybe a package left at the wrong door. But when I opened it, I froze. There they were, my parents, standing on the porch like it was 2012 again, like the years hadn't grown teeth. My mom held a container of oatmeal cookies, her old specialty, burnt around the edges, soft in the middle, the kind I used to beg for. "Micah," she said, her voice soft with a practiced smile. "We thought we'd stop by. Just for a minute." I didn't say anything. Not at first. My dad shifted beside her, clearing his throat like he was preparing for a speech. We figured we could talk. No pressure. Just reconnect. My mom lifted the container, as if a half-dozen cookies could dissolve years of silence and second-tier treatment. "No," I said, not with anger, just finality. There was a pause, surprise flickering across her face. "We just wanted to talk." She tried again. Things got heated. "Sure, but we're still your family." I didn't take the cookies. "We've all made mistakes," my dad added. "Raising a teenager's hard, pushing everyone away. We were trying to be patient." Then she said it. The sentence I think she'd always held back but never stopped believing. "She's not blood. Micah, she's not really one of us." She said it kindly, as if she were offering a favor, like she expected me to nod, to thank her for the honesty. Instead, I stepped back and said clearly, "You need to leave. Now." My dad blinked like I'd slapped him. My mom's voice cracked. "You'll regret this. When she leaves, when she forgets about you, you'll come back." I stood firm. "You don't get to insult my daughter and then wonder why the door isn't open. This door, it's closed." And I shut it, quietly, without a slam, because fury wasn't necessary. The next morning, I told Jonah. He sat still for a long time, quiet. Then he said, "They really think I'll leave you?" "No," I replied. "They hope you will, so I'll need them again." He looked down, jaw clenched. Then he nodded once. "They don't get to hope things about me." That line stuck with me, because he was right. He wasn't a symbol, or a lesson, or a wound they could poke when they felt like it. He was his own person, with a spine they never saw being built. I thought that would be the end. But a week later, my cousin Alex forwarded me an email Rachel had sent to the extended family. It was long, rambling, vile. She called Jonah manipulative, said he'd isolated me from the family, that I was obsessed with him, that I had let a kid erase decades of loyalty. She even wrote that Jonah's distance proved he never felt like one of us. And somehow, I didn't feel rage. I felt exhaustion. But I didn't fight back with fire. I just gathered what I'd already written: receipts, photos, quiet facts, and sent it again. Same subject line, same tone. For those who want the full story, some responded with support. Some stayed silent. A few defended Rachel. Others just faded out of our lives altogether. And I let them, because we weren't in the business of begging people to love us anymore. A few days later, Jonah posted a photo of his art exhibit. A self-portrait made with charcoal, oil, and thread. A boy with one hand shielding his eyes, but his chest glowed like a lantern. The caption read, "Light doesn't beg to be seen, it just keeps shining." I didn't comment, just saved it. Later that night, he called. "Got into the mentorship program," he said. "The one for artists focused on advocacy." I smiled. "They're lucky to have you." He was quiet for a moment. Then, I used to think I'd have to be the best to be accepted, to prove something. And now I know I just have to be whole. That night, I stood in the hallway, looking at a canvas he'd left behind, a painting of 3 figures walking toward a horizon. They weren't holding hands, but you could feel the closeness in the space between them. We weren't a perfect family, but we were real, and we were still here. I thought of all the years I tried to be quiet, to keep peace by making myself small. But silence never gave us peace. Love did. Fierce, uncompromising, chosen. That's the door we walked through, and we never looked back. Story 2. I'm 37 now, and if you told me a year ago that I'd be writing this, I would have laughed in your face. 7 years of marriage to Peggy. My supposed soulmate ended in a betrayal so deep, it nearly broke me. But sometimes, life has a twisted sense of justice. 3 years into our marriage, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She was given 6 months, but fought for nearly a year and a half. During that time, I watched her fade away in the Victorian mansion that had been in our family for generations. 2 years before her diagnosis, she'd remarried. Robert seemed genuine, charming, attentive, financially stable from his real estate career. I was skeptical, but he treated her well. And over time, I accepted him. Looking back, there were red flags. Once, I overheard him on a hushed call, insisting someone would get their money soon. He claimed it was a contractor issue. Another time, my mother mentioned missing jewelry, which Robert conveniently found days later in an odd spot. Still, I dismissed these incidents. TikTok, Melsewin, YTS Scribe, Plaristo, ICRD Journal, Barason. When my mother realized her time was limited, she called me to her bedside. "I've updated my will," she whispered. "The house and most assets go to you. Robert will be taken care of. But this home is yours. It's our legacy." She made me promise to keep the details between us and her lawyer, wanting to spare Robert further grief. I agreed. After her passing, I was too grief-stricken to focus on inheritance matters. Robert seemed equally devastated. We mourned together. Peggy was supportive, organizing the funeral and helping sort through my mother's belongings. At least, that's what I thought. Privately, my mother's lawyer confirmed I inherited the mansion and most of her estate. He suggested waiting before making changes. Out of respect for Robert's grieving process, I agreed, letting Robert stay in the mansion while Peggy and I remained in our downtown apartment. We visited weekly for dinners, maintaining family connections. 6 months after my mother's passing, subtle changes emerged. Peggy, always a bit materialistic, became fixated on wealth and status. Our modest apartment, once a source of pride, suddenly felt embarrassingly small to her. She made comments about the mansion, how spacious it was for just Robert, and how we could put it to better use. At first, I thought it was her way of processing grief. But then, other peculiarities arose. Peggy began having girls' nights that ran suspiciously late. Her phone was always face down. She started dressing differently, wearing perfume I hadn't bought. Each oddity alone could be dismissed, but together, they formed a pattern. Then came the coincidences. Twice, I called Robert only to be told he was at the gym or running errands. Yet Peggy was mysteriously unavailable at those times. Once, I found a receipt for an upscale restaurant in Peggy's purse. Dated for an evening, she claimed to be working late, and Robert had said he was meeting with his financial advisor. Refinery 29. Zao, Reddit, Twest, YouTube. Rest. I'm not naturally suspicious. Friends often teased me for being too trusting. But even I couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. When my best friend Marcus mentioned seeing Peggy's car parked near the mansion on a day she said she was shopping with her sister, something broke inside me. Still, I needed proof. I couldn't accuse my wife and stepfather based on hunches. So, I devised a plan. I told Peggy I was traveling to Chicago for a 3-day business conference. A trip that didn't exist. I rented a car and staked out my mother's mansion from a discreet distance. Nothing happened the first day. I felt foolish. But on the second evening, just as I was about to give up, Peggy's car pulled into the driveway. Through my camera's zoom lens, I watched as Robert greeted her not with the casual familiarity of family, but with an intimate embrace that made my stomach turn. I sat in that car for 3 hours, photographing their silhouettes as they moved through the house, eventually settling in what had been my mother's bedroom. The pain was physical, like someone had hollowed out my chest. But beneath the agony, something cold and calculated formed a determination to understand the full scope of their betrayal before taking action. Over the next week, while maintaining the facade of normalcy, I hired a private investigator. The evidence he gathered was devastating. Text messages spanning months, photographs of hotel meetings that predated my mother's death, and recorded conversations revealing the true nature of their relationship. Most sickening was their explicit discussion of the mansion and my mother's money, with Robert assuring Peggy that once enough time had passed, he'd reveal that my mother left everything to him, not me. But they didn't know about my private conversation with my mother or the arrangements with her lawyer. Robert had seen only a preliminary will draft from years earlier. My mother had deliberately allowed him to believe the document remained valid. He also frequently referenced verbal promises my mother supposedly made about their future together in the mansion. What he didn't know was that she had quietly updated her will during her last months after discovering some troubling financial behaviors. He firmly believed he was the primary beneficiary, with only a small portion designated for me. In reality, the opposite was true. When confronted with the evidence, both initially denied everything, Peggy cried, claiming the photos were misleading and the text messages misinterpreted. Robert attempted to portray himself as a lonely widower who had succumbed to a moment of weakness. But as I methodically presented each piece of evidence, their denials crumbled. Bearbrook, plumbed. Podscribe, Blackwin. How long? I asked, my voice unnaturally calm. Peggy's response cut deeper than I thought possible. Since before she died. Their affair had begun while my mother was still fighting for her life. While I was splitting time between work, hospital visits, and home care, my wife was sleeping with my stepfather. The complete disregard for my mother's dignity and my own feelings was breathtaking in its cruelty. I didn't yell. I didn't break things. Instead, I quietly informed them that I would be filing for divorce and expected Peggy to move out of our apartment immediately. I told Robert I knew about the will without revealing that I knew the truth and that I wouldn't contest his claim to the mansion for now. My apparent acceptance of their narrative confused them. They had expected rage, a fight. My calculated calm was disorienting, which was exactly what I wanted. Let them think they'd won. The divorce proceedings began, and I strategically appeared defeated and disinterested in fighting for assets. My lawyer, one of the best in the state and fully briefed on my strategy, advised me publicly to accept Peggy's terms while privately preparing for what was to come. Peggy, believing that Robert would soon have control of the mansion and my mother's wealth, agreed to a relatively modest settlement, eager to be free to pursue her new life. Meanwhile, Robert began renovating sections of the mansion, clearly anticipating his future with Peggy. They became increasingly bold, appearing together at restaurants and shopping for furniture. My friends expressed concern at my apparent indifference, but I assured them I was healing in my own way. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, the estate formally entered probate. The timing was deliberate. I had requested a delay for emotional readiness, a request the sympathetic court granted. Now, with the divorce complete and Peggy no longer legally entitled to any new assets I might acquire, it was time for the will to be properly executed. I arranged to meet Robert and Peggy at the mansion, ostensibly to collect some remaining personal items of my mother's that held sentimental value. They were already discussing which rooms to redecorate as I pulled into the driveway, the confidence in their expressions as they greeted me. The barely concealed triumph only strengthened my resolve. We gathered in the grand living room where my mother had hosted countless family gatherings. We stood in the living room, me, Peggy, and Robert, surrounded by memories that used to mean something. My mother's antique cabinet still stood in the corner. The same lace curtains she loved swayed in the breeze coming through the open windows. It should have felt familiar. Instead, it felt like standing in a stranger's house. Robert tried to control the room like he always did. He motioned toward a box near the fireplace. "We've packed up some of your mom's things," he said, like he was doing me a favor. "Figured you might want to take them now." Peggy just smiled faintly, standing a little too close to him. She was wearing a designer coat I didn't recognize, probably one he bought for her. It was surreal, the two of them acting like I was a visitor in my own family home. I didn't say much, just nodded and let them believe I was still on the outside. Then I pulled out the envelope. Robert's smile faltered as I laid the documents on the coffee table. Peggy tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing. "This is the official, notarized will," I said, calmly. "Executed 2 months before my mother passed. I had it certified by the court this morning." They didn't move. I let the silence stretch until the tension turned sharp. "My mother left the house and everything else to me," I said. "All of it." Peggy leaned forward, snatched up the papers, scanning like she could will the words to say something else. Robert grabbed them next, flipping pages with shaking hands. His voice cracked as he said, "That's not possible. She told me. She told you what you wanted to hear." I cut in, "Because she knew what you were after. She knew about your gambling, Robert. She found the debt letters. She didn't want to embarrass you, so she stayed quiet. But she changed the will." I turned to Peggy. "She knew about you, too, not the affair, but the way you looked at the house. She told me. Right at the end, watch them, James. They'll want what they didn't earn." "Huh?" Peggy's expression twisted, all her grace gone in an instant. She turned on Robert, voice rising. "You said the house was yours. You told me we'd start fresh here." Robert stepped away like she'd struck him. "You used me to get in here. You pretended to care." I watched them unravel, each blaming the other, both trying to salvage the lie they'd built. It was the first honest thing I'd seen between them. Chaos. They didn't love each other. They didn't even respect each other. They just shared a goal. The house. After a minute, I cleared my throat. "You have 1 hour to pack your personal items. After that, security will escort you out. The locks will be changed by sundown." Peggy looked at me like she'd never seen me before. "James, please. You and I, we were married for years. We can fix this." I almost laughed. You weren't just cheating on me. You betrayed my mother's memory. There's no coming back from that. Robert tried to regain control, to speak calmly. This is ridiculous. You're being emotional. No, I said. This is the most rational thing I've done in a long time. They left with a few boxes and no dignity. The security team made sure of it. Over the next few days, word spread fast. Friends who had believed Peggy's version of events, the one where I was the emotionally distant husband who just didn't understand her, started calling to apologize. Turns out, betrayal loses its charm once the truth comes out. Robert disappeared, last I heard. He moved to Florida to stay with a cousin. His real estate business was in shambles. Years of bad investments and quiet debts had finally caught up to him. He left behind a few suits and an empty whiskey bottle in the study. Peggy didn't go far, but her fall was just as sharp. With no husband and no mansion, she ended up renting a small apartment in a neighborhood she used to mock. Her social media went quiet. No more brunch with the girls or luxury product hauls. Just silence. She tried contacting me a few times. Emails, texts, a voicemail where she said she missed the life we built. She showed up once outside my office building crying. I had to get security involved. Eventually, I filed a restraining order. That was the last I heard from her. For a while, once they were gone, I took time to breathe, to feel the silence of the house again. It was strange at first. For a while, I kept expecting to hear my mom's voice from down the hallway or see her watering the plants on the porch. But that passed. I started renovating the mansion, not in the way Robert had. I wasn't flipping it into some sterile designer piece. I restored it. I took down the cheap lighting fixtures Robert installed and replaced them with the originals my mom had loved. I refinished the kitchen cabinets myself. I even planted her favorite rose bushes in the backyard. That house stopped feeling like a battlefield and started feeling like home again. I also launched a foundation in her name, a small nonprofit for pancreatic cancer research. It didn't take away the pain, but it gave it a place to go. It gave me purpose again. By spring, things were different, quieter, peaceful. I was waking up without anger in my chest, sleeping through the night, eating without feeling hollow. For the first time in a long while, I felt steady. Then, on an unseasonably cool evening in June, I came home and found Peggy sitting on the front steps. She looked different, not disheveled, but not polished either. She wore last year's coat, and the designer bag she always flaunted was missing. She looked smaller somehow, like life had finally gotten too heavy to carry. I just wanted to talk, she said. Please. I stood there, keys in hand, unsure whether I felt pity or resentment. I've changed, she said. I've been seeing a therapist. I've thought a lot about who I used to be. I know I lost something important. You lost it the day you walked into this house behind my back. I replied, I'm not here to fix that for you. Just a chance, she whispered. Just a coffee. Just to talk. I shook my head. You don't need closure. You need consequences. And with that, I turned and walked inside, locking the door behind me. She sat there for a while. Eventually, the motion lights went off, and when I looked out the window, she was gone. I don't hate her. I don't even think about her that much anymore. But I'll never forgive what she tried to take from me and from my mother. What I had now was something they never understood, peace, and I wasn't about to give it up. A few months passed. Summer rolled into early fall, and I started settling into a rhythm that felt like mine again. I was still getting used to how quiet peace could be, how unfamiliar it felt after years of bracing for the next disappointment, the next betrayal. But slowly, the edges of my life softened. Most mornings, I'd sit on the porch with coffee in hand, watching the fog lift off the lawn. That house, my mother's house, didn't feel like a monument to what I'd lost anymore. It felt like a place where I could breathe, where something new could grow. I didn't expect much else to change. Not really. But the universe has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. I met Alyssa at the hardware store of all places. I was looking for a new drill bit set, and she was asking someone about weatherproof paint. She had this steady presence, like someone who wasn't in a hurry to prove anything. We crossed paths again 2 weeks later at the farmer's market. This time, she was buying honey, and I was trying to choose between 2 kinds of sourdough. She made a joke about bread like it was wine, too many options and none of them bad. I laughed for the first time in what felt like years. It wasn't loud or forced, just easy. We started talking, casually at first. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into walks through town. We never rushed it, She'd been through her own storm, a long-term relationship that ended in more confusion than closure. We understood each other in the way only people who've been deeply hurt do, quietly, respectfully, with no need to fill the silence. I didn't tell her everything right away, but eventually, the story came out about my mother. The will, Peggy, Robert, the betrayal. She listened without judgment, just nodded like she understood more than she let on. When I told her I wasn't looking for anything complicated, she smiled and said, "Neither am I, just something honest." That was all I needed to hear. In the meantime, the foundation in my mom's name was growing. What started as a modest project began attracting attention. We partnered with a local clinic for early screenings and held a fundraiser at the house, my house, for the first time since everything happened. I remember standing in the kitchen that night, watching guests chat and laugh, wine glasses in hand, soft music playing from the speakers tucked behind the bookshelves. The smell of rosemary and lemon drifted from the open window. For the first time in a long time, that house was full of warmth again. After the last guest left, I walked through each room, flipping off lights, touching the walls like they were old friends. When I reached the staircase, I looked up at the portrait of my mom. She wasn't one for formal photographs, but this one had always been her favorite. Her sitting on the back steps, mug of tea in hand, a half smile on her face. Like she knew something the rest of us didn't. "You were right," I whispered. "They didn't last, but I did." And that was the truth. I never heard from Robert again. Rumors came and went. I heard he tried to start a new real estate project and failed. Someone said he'd moved in with a cousin who didn't really want him there. Another said he was trying to sell timeshares in Florida now. Whatever the truth was, it wasn't my concern anymore. Peggy stayed quiet after that night on the steps. She didn't send any more emails or letters. Her number was still blocked. Sometimes, I'd see her name pop up in mutual circles. Someone had seen her working part-time, or dating someone new, or trying to rebrand herself online. But none of it mattered. She had her choices. I had mine. Alyssa and I didn't rush things, but by winter, she was spending most weekends at the house. She loved the garden. Even in the cold, said she could already picture what we'd plant in spring. We spent Christmas just the two of us, with cinnamon rolls, old movies, and a snowfall so perfect it looked staged. It was simple, and it was enough. One evening, as we sat in the living room, fire crackling in the hearth, Alyssa looked around and said, "This place doesn't feel heavy." "I thought it might, with everything you've been through." "But it doesn't," I nodded. "That's because it's not haunted anymore. The past isn't chasing me around this place. It stayed with them. We didn't need to say their names." She leaned into me, and I wrapped my arm around her. We stayed like that a long time. I've learned a few things through all this. About people, about betrayal, about rebuilding. But the most important thing, it's that you don't need to win the loudest fight to come out whole. Sometimes the quiet path, the patient one, gives you more power than anger ever could. The house is still here. So am I. Stronger, yes, but not harder. That's what matters most. And when people ask me now how I managed to hold it all together, I just smile and say, I didn't. I broke. Then I built myself back with better wood. Because that's the truth. Not every storm takes you out. Some just clear the ground so you can start fresh. Story 3. My name is Claire. I'm 36 years old. And I've been married to Daniel, 44, for 6 years. We met at a community outreach event where I was coordinating volunteers and he was managing logistics. Our connection was immediate, and within a year, we were married. At the time, I was deeply invested in my career as a senior marketing director at a tech firm, and the idea of becoming a stepmother hadn't crossed my mind until I met Daniel and his son, Ethan, who was 17 then. Ethan's mother, Lisa Forteben, made it clear from the beginning that she saw me as an outsider. She often made passive-aggressive remarks during drop-offs and pickups, questioning my intentions and implying that I was only interested in Daniel's financial stability. Ironically, I was earning more than Daniel at the time. Despite the tension, Ethan and I maintained a cordial relationship. He was polite, and occasionally, we'd have meaningful conversations about his college aspirations. 3 months ago, Ethan called Daniel, claiming he had suffered a severe back injury at work. He said he was in excruciating pain and couldn't manage daily activities on his own. Daniel was immediately concerned and offered our home for his recovery. I had reservations. Ethan had roommates who could assist him, and his mother lived nearby. However, wanting to support Daniel and Ethan. I agreed. I even arranged to work remotely to help care for Ethan during his recovery. Symbis assessment. Plawin. Mile in my shoes. Plast. When we picked Ethan up, I noticed inconsistencies in his behavior. His expressions of pain seemed exaggerated when Daniel was present, and he appeared more comfortable when he thought no one was watching. I dismissed these observations, attributing them to the complexities of pain. We converted my home office into a comfortable space for Ethan, complete with a TV and other amenities. I adjusted my work schedule to accommodate his needs, preparing special meals and ensuring his comfort. However, Ethan's demands became increasingly unreasonable. He would text me for snacks, drinks, or entertainment while I was in the middle of important work calls. If I didn't respond immediately, he would call out loudly, disrupting my meetings. He complained about his medication and requested stronger prescriptions through Daniel. When I suggested gentle movement to aid his recovery, he dismissed my advice, claiming I didn't understand real pain. One evening, I returned home early from grocery shopping and heard Ethan talking on the phone. He was animated and sounded healthier than he had in weeks. Curious, I listened from outside his room. He was speaking with Lisa, boasting about how he had manipulated us. He admitted to faking his injury to live rent-free and have me cater to his needs. He even mentioned being fired for showing up drunk at work. I was shocked and hurt. I had invested time and energy into caring for Ethan, only to discover it was all a ruse. I recorded the conversation for evidence. Over the next few days, I gathered more proof. I found empty beer cans in his trash, observed him moving normally when he thought no one was home, and even installed a camera in the living room, with Daniel's consent, that captured Ethan exercising without any signs of pain. I struggled with how to confront Daniel. He adored his son, and I didn't want to cause unnecessary pain. After consulting with a close friend, I decided to hold a family meeting. I presented the evidence to Daniel and Ethan. Daniel was devastated, and Ethan reacted with anger, accusing me of spying and trying to turn Daniel against him. Daniel, however, stood firm. He expressed his disappointment and told Ethan he needed to leave our home by the end of the weekend. He offered to help Ethan find resources for addiction and therapy, but made it clear that he couldn't stay with us until he took responsibility for his actions. Ethan left in a rage, and Lisa arrived shortly after, hurling accusations at me. Daniel defended me, stating that Ethan's actions were his own responsibility. In the aftermath, Ethan launched a smear campaign against me on social media, portraying himself as a victim of an evil stepmother. Some acquaintances began treating us differently, and Lisa continued to spread her version of events. The strain tested our marriage, but Daniel never blamed me for revealing the truth. We supported each other through the pain and began to heal together. 2 weeks later, Daniel and I sat in our living room, reflecting on the events. He admitted that he had enabled Ethan's behavior over the years and resolved to support his son only when he was ready to take responsibility for his actions. We knew the road ahead would be challenging, but we were committed to rebuilding our lives on a foundation of honesty and trust. The house felt quieter after Ethan left. Not peaceful, exactly, more like the stillness after a storm. There was debris everywhere, just not the kind you can sweep up. Daniel spent a lot of time in his own head. I'd catch him staring at the wall like he was watching an old home video play behind his eyes. I gave him space, but I stayed close. Grief doesn't only follow death. It follows loss of belief, too. He wasn't just mourning the way his son betrayed us. He was mourning the image of Ethan he'd held on to for so long. Meanwhile, Lisa didn't slow down. Her voice showed up through angry voicemails, social media posts, and even Daniel's distant relatives. According to her, I had tricked Daniel into throwing his son out and abandoning his responsibilities as a father. It was cruel, calculated. She used words like cold, manipulative, vindictive. I'd been called worse. What made it hard wasn't the insult. It was the way people who hadn't seen us in years were ready to believe it. Daniel did his best to shield me, but I saw how each phone call chipped away at his spirit. I reminded him again and again that we didn't bring this on ourselves. Ethan made his choices. We just refused to keep enabling them. I think deep down, Daniel knew that. But acceptance doesn't stop the ache. About a month after Ethan moved out, the messages from him stopped. That silence should have brought some peace, but it only made things heavier. We found out through mutual friends that Ethan had been crashing on couches, unable to find steady work because of the termination on his record. He and Lisa had apparently clashed not long after he moved in with her. She'd expected gratitude. He'd expected to be coddled. Neither got what they wanted. I hated that part of me still cared, that I still worried about him, that I still replayed the sound of his voice mocking me on the phone to his mother as I brought him lunch, folded his blankets, stayed up late to prep his meals, and still, I worried. Then one evening, Daniel got a text. "Ethan, can we meet? Just talk." We didn't jump at it. We talked it through carefully. Daniel needed to hear his son's voice. I needed boundaries. So we agreed we'd go together. Neutral ground. A coffee shop. 1 hour. When Ethan walked in, he looked like someone who'd been living in a storm. Pale, unshaven, clothes wrinkled and worn. No swagger, no smug smirk. He looked small. "Thanks for coming," he mumbled, eyes low. "I know you probably hate me," Daniel answered before I could. "We don't hate you, son. We're hurt, but we still care." What followed wasn't some magical reconciliation. Ethan said sorry, but it came with a lot of detours. He blamed stress. He blamed Lisa. He blamed his job. He apologized, but only as much as someone could when they're still making excuses. Then he asked if he could come back home. Daniel looked at me, and I said it first. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. Trust takes time. You have to show you're serious." Ethan looked like he'd expected that, maybe even needed to hear it. We told him we'd help pay the deposit on a small apartment if he committed to counseling and therapy. No more lying, no more taking advantage. He nodded slowly, like someone seeing the edge of a long road. He didn't know he'd have to walk alone. Over the next couple of months, we watched from a distance as Ethan began to rebuild. He got a job at a warehouse hard work. Early mornings, he stuck with his outpatient program, paid us back little by little for the medical expenses he'd cost us. The payments were small, but the consistency mattered. Then one morning, something unexpected showed up in our mailbox. A letter, handwritten, no return address. But the handwriting was unmistakably Ethan's. He wrote about everything. The manipulation, the lies, the entitlement, no excuses this time. He admitted it all. He admitted using Lisa's resentment like fuel. He wrote about fearing adulthood, about resenting me not for who I was, but for what I represented, a shift in his father's loyalty. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He said he didn't deserve it. But he thanked us for stopping him before he went further down a path he couldn't return from. Daniel read the letter 3 times that night. I watched his hands tremble. This wasn't a fix, but it was a beginning. They started meeting once a week. Coffee. No heavy conversations at first, just rebuilding trust from the ground up. Daniel didn't push me to come along, but after a few weeks, he asked gently if I'd consider it. I agreed. The first meeting was stiff, polite, not warm. Ethan made an effort to ask about my work. I asked about his new place. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Lisa, predictably, didn't take this well. When she realized Ethan was leaning away from her influence, she tried one last burst of chaos. More Facebook rants, a letter to Daniel's parents. But without Ethan feeding the fire, it died out quickly. 6 months after that first painful confrontation, Ethan came over for dinner. He brought news, a promotion at work, and enrollment in night classes to finish his business degree. We celebrated quietly. Daniel's eyes glistened with pride. I could feel the shift in the air. Not repair, exactly, but growth. A new structure, built on honesty, not guilt. Before Ethan left that night, he turned to me. "I can't take back what I did," he said, "but I can keep showing up different. Thank you for not giving up even when I didn't deserve it." I didn't say much, just a nod. It was enough. We weren't the family either of us imagined, but we were something real now, not built on obligation or illusion, but on truth. And that was a start. Seasons passed. The mornings got cooler. The light in our house changed. It used to feel like tension lived in the corners, like a shadow waiting to creep back in. But slowly, that feeling left. In its place was a quiet rhythm, a steadier one. Ethan became part of our life again, not in the same way, but in a way that felt earned. He didn't sleep under our roof. He didn't ask for favors. He came by for dinner now and then, helped Daniel fix a gutter that winter, brought over a tray of brownies once store-bought. But still, his voice wasn't defensive anymore. He laughed more, apologized when he slipped up. And when he was late, he owned it. That alone said a lot. Daniel, he changed too. He started seeing a therapist, said he needed help untangling the guilt he'd carried for years, not just from Ethan, but from his divorce, his choices, even the quiet regrets he'd buried deep. Some nights we'd sit out on the porch, him nursing a beer, me holding a mug of tea, and he'd talk not to fix anything, just to let it out. I learned that healing doesn't come with fireworks. It's slow. It shows up in how people move around each other, in how Ethan stopped flinching when I disagreed with him, in how Daniel stopped apologizing for things he didn't do, in how I could finally talk about what happened without my stomach tightening. One night, over dinner, Ethan said something that stuck with me. I used to think love meant never being called out. Like, if someone really loved me, they'd let me be whoever I wanted, even when I was being awful. But now I think love's the opposite. It's telling someone, you're better than this, and holding them to it. He looked at me when he said it. I didn't cry, but something loosened in my chest. Lisa's voice had gone quiet. She still posted things, I'm sure, but without an audience. Her words didn't land the same. Ethan stopped answering her when she spun stories. He didn't trash her. He just didn't play along anymore. Boundaries. That's what he was building now. He stuck with therapy. His job started giving him more responsibility. Not just physical work, but leadership. One of his supervisors told Daniel that Ethan had become one of the most reliable guys on the floor. Kid's serious about making something of himself, he'd said. We didn't tell Ethan we'd heard that, but we were proud. On the 1-year mark of the confrontation, Ethan asked if we'd meet him at the park near our house. Just the 3 of us. It was a cold day, wind sharp enough to bite, but we bundled up and went. He brought a thermos of coffee, handed out cups like it was a peace offering. I just wanted to say something, he started, hands shoved into his coat pockets. I don't think I ever really thanked you, not just for helping me get my life back on track, but for seeing me for who I was even when I couldn't. He took a breath. I hated you for it, Emily. I blamed you because that was easier than looking at myself. But if you hadn't said anything that day, I don't know where I'd be. Daniel put a hand on his son's shoulder. They didn't say much after that. Men like them, they don't need long speeches. Just a touch, a nod, a silence that says more than words ever could. After that day, things kept moving forward. No drama, just normalcy. Ethan started seeing someone, a woman named Ray, quiet, thoughtful. He introduced her slowly, respectfully. She asked a lot of questions about family, about our history. Said she wanted to understand. I liked her immediately. Eventually, she joined us for dinner. She brought a homemade pie, said it was her grandmother's recipe. We all sat at the table, sharing food, stories, even a little laughter. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like there wasn't a hole between us. Just space, safe space. One night, Daniel asked me what I thought made things finally change. It wasn't the confrontation, I said. It wasn't even the letter. It was the silence after, when he had to sit in it. When we all did, Daniel nodded. Sometimes it takes losing the people who love you to realize how far you've wandered. That's what this was. Not a story about punishment, not even revenge. It was about calling someone back from the edge and not backing down when they kicked and screamed. It's strange. I wouldn't wish what we went through on anyone, but I wouldn't trade where we ended up either. We're not perfect. Ethan still messes up. So do we? But now, there's room for that. Because the foundation isn't fake smiles or obligation anymore. It's truth. It's earned respect. And it's a kind of love that doesn't flinch when things get hard. Our circle's not broken, just mended in a new way. And some part of me deep down knows that's what family really is.